Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a special guest, Nicholas Edwards. Nicholas, thank you for being here. To kick things off, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, happily. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. So, yeah, my name is Nicholas Edwards. I am the one of the founders of Champion Venture Partners, which is a sports investment firm. And then I myself am a former athlete as well. So, kind of have quite the interesting background going from former athlete to founder and entrepreneur to then also all the way to the investor seat.
Amazing. So, you've gone from being an athlete to a physiologist to building Champion Venture Partners. What sparked that shift into sports investing?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, for me, sports has always been a passion. It's just part of kind of me, overall. And when I first started as an athlete myself, I'm one of the few who's blessed to say that I transitioned out of sports seamlessly, where I got to choose when I retire. Not everybody gets to have that, right? Like a lot of people get injured, they get cut. There's all sorts of things that can happen. And because I was able to choose when I retired, I was able to seamlessly then move into role as an entrepreneur. And then I got to see firsthand kind of not only working within as an athlete in sport, but then the business of sport, knowing the business of sport, working with the companies, how to scale them across the sports asset class, to then ultimately being investors. So it's much more of a linear path when I talk about it, but it sure didn't feel that way when I went through it. It was definitely much more, a jogging line back and forth. And frankly, I'll own it that I had some amazing people open doors for me that frankly got me to where I am.
Amazing. So, you mentioned you choosing to retire from sports, and how did you how did you position yourself to be able to do that? And how did that come about, right? Because it's different now, but back in the days, in your time, a lot of athletes didn't plan for after their career, right? Whereas it's the dialogue's completely different now. You have a lot of athletes planning and investing, etc. So for you, how did you do that in your time when it was kind of like a not so normal path per se, or not a lot of people were thinking like the way you were thinking?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a normal path. So for me, my sport, I was an MMA athlete. So I guess even backing up, I played college football. I tore the ACL that killed the dream for me. And I actually had a former wrestling coach tell me that I should try MMA. I'm like, oh, I really didn't want to do it. I really didn't think that that was my calling. But I was a wrestler ever since I was about 4 years old. So I actually seamlessly went right into it and I absolutely loved it. And so I knew, I guess there's no other way to say it. I knew that I couldn't get punched forever. It's just not, there's a short fuse to that sport. And so it really was kind of the time where I was going through seeing all the tech that we were using to kind of surround us and surround our team, that it kind of called to me where I got injured. Now we're using the tech. I want to be on the other side of it. So I got my degree in physiology while still competing. And then, as that happened, I got my degree. After I got my master's, my daughter was on the way. And I said, this is kind of the perfect time to kind of transition out. I'm going to have a new daughter at home. I have a budding career in physiology. This is the end of it. So I actually wrapped it up so that I competed at Worlds. I did well. And then that was the end.
Got it. So switching gears back to Champion Venture Partners, what is that for the viewers that are watching that don't know about you guys yet?
Sure. So Champion Venture Partners is actually our holding company for something called Champion Fund, which is an alts for all play that allows everyday investors to invest in the sports asset class. So we go after everything from teams, leagues, all the way down to kind of what's adjacent to them. So we'll probably talk about this, I'm sure, many times over this recording, but we really believe that sports is not just the team. If you look at kind of what happens in the sports asset class and where it goes, it's made up of so much more. It goes from the team to ticketing, to the stadium, to the parking, to short-term rentals around and everything. And so we want to make sure that we have access and are providing access to the fans to have meaningful ownership in sports.
Amazing. Do you guys have a lot of competitors in this space, or are you guys the only ones?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sports investment firms out there, but everybody kind of has their niche, right? And so I don't necessarily consider it competitive because we're all trying to get more, we're trying to advance the industry and we're trying to push things through. So with that, I think on the front side of it, we have folks that go after sports tech plays. We go after groups that there are groups out there that go after minority stakes in teams. We're probably one of the only ones out there that goes for the totality of the asset class. And to my knowledge, we're the only ones that have it open to retail investors, to the everyday folks.
You often say CVP puts athletes in the driver's seat. Can you share a story that shows what that looks like in action?
Ooh, that's great. I'll take a step back and say I think really what enables the driver's seat. And so when we first started this firm, we looked at kind of the athlete as our initial investor avatar. And so if you look at that and you look at what the athlete needs, they obviously are taking part in sports. They're basically firsthand sitting there in billion-dollar assets. And so they get to see from soup to nuts what happens and what works with that. So we wanted to create something where they're in the know, where they're heard, and then where they can really affect change and kind of put their assets to work and kind of the things that they've built over their careers. And so that's what we've taken. And so, we have a bunch of stories, everything from folks that have invested with us to then we are listening to what they're seeing in the industry to then going from vocalizing what they think we should target next for fan experience, media and broadcasting rights. And then ultimately, if we invest in an asset that actually is right up their alley, we'll actually call on them and say, hey, is this something you want to be part of this company? So whether they have maybe a marketing spin, maybe they are a fractional executive, we allow them to come in and then have direct access to their portfolio companies. And so that's really one of those where it's putting them in the driver's seat, not only in their own wealth creation to have ownership in this platform, but then also allowing them to take part in it in an active role.
Got it. Nick, why would an investor choose your fund over other funds?
Ooh.
What's that unique aspect?
Yeah, well, what's really unique is we've created this machine where both accredited and non-accredited investors can invest together. And typically that's oil and water. So the accredited investors come in and they're part of the GP stakes vehicle where there's some extra pieces that they can grab onto. But then the non-accredited investors can also invest and have the growth in the same sports asset class. So it's stock appreciation and cash flow, which is great. The beautiful thing about this is a lot of firms charge something called an interest and carry. So interest is basically an annual fee that's taken to manage it, and then carry is basically a profit share at the top end of whatever is made. So let's say there's a large return out of $100. That 20% would literally go to the GP, and the 80% would be returned to the investor of those profits. We have it so that there's no carry. So this is one of those where in the retail investor, they do pay a management fee, but it's very low. And then also make it so that there's no carry. So it makes it a much easier vehicle where then we're equally yoked with our investors and we put our own money at risk and we make money the exact same way as all of our investors.
Got it. I'm seeing a lot more professional soccer teams crowdfund. You got, a club like Orange County that raised a few millions from their fans. And there's other clubs, Chattanooga, that's an MLS Next Pro, that a crowdfund. So there's a lot more teams interested in crowdfunding, and you hear it around or see it around Europe as well, and the US and other countries. Why are clubs opening up the door to retail investors?
Well, I think it's the right idea because ultimately, if you follow kind of how the trajectory of sports is going, it's going beyond match day, right? It's literally looking at monetizing the asset and the surrounding assets 365 days a year. And ultimately, what is driving that is consumer behavior. So if you follow the digital footprint of the dollar or the influential models that are happening right now, whether you're a quote unquote influencer or you have a distribution channel like an Amazon, you're going to have this access to those end consumers. And their behavior is ultimately going to tell you where to put your money and how things are moving. So a club logically can look at this and say, oh my gosh, if the fans are going to be here to activate 365 days a year, then we want them to have ownership in this. And so empowering the fans, I think, is the right way to build long term growth and also long term stability, and also make it so that they're capitalizing on the mainstream push right now of behavior.
Got it. Do you think, majority are still privately owned private investors and sports franchises? Do you see a big shift happening where 50% of teams in the US, for example, start opening up the doors to fans?
I someday, yes. I think where it's going to take a long time. And the reason why is if you look at a lot of US based assets, private equity has just entered the scene. And so that literally means that somebody's taking chips off the table. So there has to be someone who wants out, or there needs to be a change of control. It's the only way that the fans get in. And so there needs to be, number one, a machine and a mechanism for the fans to actually invest. Step number two is somebody needs to actually want to take chips off the table. So until there's a massive transition between ownership stakes, it's probably not going to be as prevalent. But over time, we'll watch this next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I do think we're going to see those levels happen, but it's going to be a slow churn.
Got it. You've compared deals in the US and Europe. Why are American soccer clubs valued so differently? And what should fans or investors take from that?
A lot of it comes down to the media and broadcasting rights and how far reaching you can take that asset and do distribution. The US is obviously a very large market that is landlocked together. And so you have that, and it makes it a lot easier to capitalize on the media, the broadcasting rights. And so the valuations typically and the land are going to be higher. So, for investors and people are looking right now, the Goldilocks zone is over in Europe. There's a lot of, and also down south in Latin America. There's some amazing opportunities for both the land grabs as well as the assets because they still are valued at a lower area because they are just now turning that fan experience, the stadium side, and then the media broadcasting rights over.
Interesting. When investors come to you guys, obviously every investor has their own interest. Do you see investors heading more so to wanting to invest in the US or in Europe?
I get a mixed bag. I think that a lot of investors, clearly because they're here, they absolutely want to see what US assets are available. But when you see the return profiles, that changes the want and more of the, I would say the vanity item play, right? Call it what it is, especially if you're looking in like the big five leagues, the vanity item play versus the upside. And so a lot of investors are really looking at what that potential market upside looks like because where we're seeing the numbers in Europe and other markets right now is the same thing that we saw in the US about 5 to 10 years ago. So if you take about like an 8-year flip and go from a few $100 million club to now over $1 billion club, that's the same type of profiles we're seeing available in Europe.
Got it. I know we're soccer focused, but do you guys only focus on investing into soccer or are you guys looking at other sports as well?
No, we love soccer just because obviously the prevalence and looking at exactly the large fan base worldwide with soccer, but we're across the board. I would say even our shareholders are probably by and large closer to American football. But we are literally across sports, everything from extreme sports down to golf, snowboarding, skiing, sports adjacencies, all the way up to large teams and leagues.
Got it. You're passionate about fans becoming owners. What makes this model powerful and what obstacles stand in the way of scaling it?
We touched on this a little bit already. I think some of the obstacles really are access and actually making it so that people have the ability to actually invest in this asset class. It's people have been left out of the rooms for far too long. And it really hasn't been until recent legislation changes. So both access to crowdfunding platforms, to tender offer funds, to interval funds, to make it so that fans and non-accredited investors can invest alongside accredited investors. And so we're very passionate about making the fans, the athletes, part of the ownership group. Because like I said, that consumer demand is driving this ecosystem. And I think it's only a matter of time before we see more and more platforms built so that it can sustain that side of the population. There's not a reason why that a sports team needs to be one large owner in a 1 billion-dollar family. It can absolutely be hundreds of individuals, thousands of individuals that all are massive fans and have a stake in wanting to know what the team's going to do.
Got it. So this is kind of reminding me of like the ownership, like the fan ownership in Europe, like Portugal, for example, or I think Brazil is also that structured that way in regards to, I remember like hearing a story when I was in Miami at the Hilton at the Confoot event. And there was someone from the Portuguese Federation and, we were talking and he was sharing, he was sharing the structure of club ownership and how it was so different compared to from Portugal to US. And he was saying, if I'm not mixing this up, hopefully not between Brazil or Portugal, but he was saying if a club in Division 2 gets promoted to Division 1, but their standards do not meet the Division 1 level, or if the fans don't want the club to move up, they have so much influence that could be stopped, the promotion of the team, even if the team won in their second division league, they won't be promoted to Division One by not either meeting the criteria or due to fans not wanting the club to go for whatever reason, is what I'm recalling. But that's what it just reminds me of, just like the influence of how fans can have impact on decisions that are made internally.
They can. Oh man. And ultimately it comes down to the athletes on the field and the fans in the stands. The fans pay for it. And obviously the athletes on the field are the one who are the engine and drivers behind it. So it makes all the sense in the world.
You've said that the real opportunity isn't just in the team, but it's in everything around them. You've mentioned this a few times already. Stadiums, fan zones, food and beverage. Why is that ecosystem approach so crucial?
It comes down to, again, monetizing the asset and alongside it 365 days a year. If there's not an opportunity to play a game every single day, which there's not, you got to use the spaces to really, I guess, make it so that fans have an active stake and stay in what they're doing. So if you think about the fan experience being, you could have a co-working space here. You are able to work right alongside where everybody's practicing. You can have a gym right next to where everybody is exercising and lifting. You can have a restaurant right there when maybe some of the athletes are done playing, they come over and they grab a beer, right? So you think about kind of this whole fandom and everybody being together. It basically makes it so that it forms a community around the asset. And the community really has traditionally been more virtual, right? Like there's fans all over the world for Team X, right? Whoever we want to play it. There's fans all over the world. They're going to buy memorabilia from wherever. Versus if you have one central spot that you can monetize, that's the holy grail. And if you look to any of the examples in the US, the number one that I love to show is looking at the Battery in Atlanta. So there, the Braves ownership group, obviously, they own the Braves, but in 1 square mile, they basically own everything that touches it. So looking at the parking, the food and bev, the ticketing, a co-working space, short-term rentals. They have a kids play area. They have tons of food and bev and restaurants around there. I mean, it's a whole ecosystem and multi-use district, and that's really what the future of sports is going to become.
Absolutely, these massive mixed-use development projects or entertainment districts, and I focus a lot on USL, and speak to quite a few USL owners in championship, USL Championship, USL One, and you're seeing a lot more posts on LinkedIn, online, with even other markets that are non-existent yet coming out with these huge projects. Not soccer being the anchor of it, and then exactly what you just shared, whether it's condos, retail, residential, other sports being programmed into the facility, etc. These are massive projects being built on 50 acres to 100 acres plus, and but anywhere between 100 million to the billions plus. And they're just massive projects and huge opportunity. And that's why I'm between me and you, Nick, I'm quite biased towards the US in regards to the opportunity to invest in soccer right now. And, anywhere, I don't think there's an opportunity like this, or as great as an opportunity as there is in the US, where you can buy into the franchise, into a professional soccer league, whether it's Division 2 or Division 3, and as well as men's and women's, and build a club from scratch, from birth. And as well as the real estate opportunity and the club opportunity, it's just massive. It's a huge opportunity versus buying into. I mean, there's still a huge opportunity there into Europe, an existing club, but you don't get that opportunity to build it from scratch. It's existing books, existing everything else. Um, but that's why I'm so biased towards the US market, and have spent a lot of time there.
And I think that's great because you're right. If you look at just fan engagement in the US market alone, it's right there. You look at soccer in particular, you look at how, let's say there's a youth soccer league, all the parents are there, and I mean, so I'm obviously, I first started working with teams in Denver. And so you look at the Colorado Rapids, obviously there's the Colorado Rapids youth program, right? But think about how awesome it is to have it right next to Dick's Sporting Goods Park. Then you have the team there. Then you have all the youth academies. Then you have food and bev, and you have everything that's right there. So when a parent's there for, a 2-day soccer tournament, they have restaurants there. They have places they can stay. They have a hotel. Building all that from scratch. And the US has great land and spots available that frankly, for emerging leagues and teams, haven't been covered yet. So it works out great.
Yeah, tons of market, tons of opportunities, and especially with women's being at still an early stage of investment opportunity. I hear a lot of different soccer investors say, their interest lies within the women's investment opportunity first, and then the men's second. Um, don't quote me, guys. With saying that, soccer is getting huge investor attention. From your perspective, what's driving that surge, and and is it sustainable?
Boy, that's a really good question. I'd say by and large, one of the big surges right now is the sheer population in the US and looking at kind of the combination of what the youth is engaging in, coupled with the people who are moving here, who are obviously living in the States. And so that makes a huge difference. I think right now we're in kind of a we're not Pollyanna about it, but it is a Goldilocks zone where a lot of emerging teams and leagues are able to flourish and actually go. And so we're seeing this kind of the U.S. system almost replicate what's been established overseas for years, right? You look at like a Serie A, Serie B team, like obviously for relegation, kind of where the teams go from a feeder system, bottom up. Premier League, same thing. The US really doesn't have that well in a lot of major pro sports. So, being that now is the time where all these emerging leagues can basically build up into the professional leagues, whether that's up to the NFL, up to the MLS, up to the NHL, I think that's why this is a very unique time. There's always going to be something in sports. I mean, sports is frankly, it's outperformed the markets for the past 60 years. I say that all the time. I sound like a broken record, but there's a reason why. It's because the fans are always demanding something. I mean, literally, obviously, in our lifetimes, we saw pickleball come from zero to obviously a nationwide phenomenon right now. Now, I'm not necessarily on that bandwagon yet, as an investor, but I sure like looking at it from soccer. But all of these are seeing this growth in emerging leagues. So it's a very unique time to act now versus, it may be the next generation that has another surge like this.
Got it. Nick, why are institutions getting involved now? Private equity firms, they're
Well, I think
diversifying the asset class.
that's exactly it. Is they're diversifying into this asset class because it's provided stable returns for decades, year over year. I think one of the reasons why it hasn't become a true asset class that people have looked at is because they're looking at all the adjacencies. People think of stadiums as real estate. They only look at real estate. Their real estate investors have been around since jump, right? So it's just now turning that focus because a lot of the owners, kind of like to the top of our conversation, want chips off the table. And so looking at rather than a billionaire to billionaire, the few people who can transact, now it's an opening up. So private equity has stepped up to say, we can put our money to work, to capitalize on fan experience, capitalize on this wave, and really make change. So you have the ability to capitalize and make change. You have the current owners ready for a new ship, and you have the fans that are ready to go. All that together provides these tailwinds that are unique.
Got it. You've worked with crowdfunding platforms and big institutional, oh my God, institutional investors. I'm not cutting that out. I'll keep it in. What are the pros and cons of each?
Fine.
Which which do you think best fits soccer future?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, soccer's future, I mean, sounded like the broken record again. I think it belongs to the fans, and I think everybody should be engaged in it, especially with how everything's shaped. So I think we're going to see more and more of this crunch where the top firms come down and the Reg CF groups come up into this asset class. If you look at like the big boys like BlackRock and all these others, they're becoming RIA status. They're slowly reaching down into this tier, and we're going to see the same thing bottom up. So I think there isn't a one or the other. I don't think they're going to go away in our lifetime, but I think we're going to see the emergence of more and more of the fans getting involved in the crowdfunding types of platforms engaging.
With your physiology background, where do you see the biggest opportunities at the intersection of athlete performance and sports business?
That's a great question. I think I wish I could say it was actually at my sweet spot. Sweet spot for me is really looking at sports medicine and physiology together for athlete performance. But I think it comes more to where athlete performance connects to fan experience. I think if you look at even NFL, the Amazon dipped their toe into that this last year, specifically looking at showing next gen stats, right? Live. So it was only a certain percentage that this person would have made that catch. Same thing in soccer, looking at the trajectory of the ball, the run speed. I think it's going to be the overlap of people want to know how other human beings like us are performing. We want to feel that connection to them. So it's going to be the physiology and athlete performance that actually connects with the fan experience, which is going to be the next emerging piece.
Interesting. And it kind of reminds me of like social media and like how athletes are dressing right now, like the importance of that and posting stories, posting their lifestyle. What are they wearing? What jewelry? Like all those
Yep.
things, right? These different
Yep.
aspects and points and perspectives, content. So that's an
100%.
interesting. I could see I could see what you're talking about. Like I could visualize that. Like that's not hard to say. Oh yeah, that can't happen. It's like that can. It's pretty clear.
Totally.
Like you could see that.
Yeah. And what's meaningful to a team, like let's say we're looking at the position where a striker is versus where the ball's kicked. That's meaningful for a coach to analyze and make plays. That's meaningful for the athlete to know how they're performing, but also for the fans to know, oh my gosh, like look at this. This is what he could do. I couldn't even do that. Maybe they play like a pickup game, right? Every weekend. Maybe their kids are playing and they're putting that into their own community, into their own thoughts. And that's a connectivity that you just can't work around. Once you have that, I mean, it is a locked bond.
That makes sense. Yeah. If we fast forward 5 years, what role do you see CVP and soccer playing in shaping the global sports investment landscape?
My gosh. Well, I think soccer is going to continue to take off and get much, much, much bigger. CVP for us, we really see it as we're going to be the catalyst to provide access in the alts for all quest. We believe in providing alternative investments for everybody, and we believe in access. And so right now, we're the only ones that are doing that for the retail investor. And so we'll be the first ones really proving out a sports private market index so that people can see it as the investment and as the asset class and then highlight where soccer goes.
Amazing. Nick, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, this has been fantastic. I'm thrilled with the questions you have. I think this is it's great to be able to share this story with folks so that they understand what's available to them, that the access is there, but then also having them take the knowledge and then applying it to whatever they're doing, whether it's in their own community for soccer, whether it's overseas, whether it's investing with groups like us or others. It's great to be able to see that and just know what's out there. It's a knowledge thing.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, once again, I truly appreciate you taking the time for being on the One Soccer Nation podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.